Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Ayla Barmmer, a leading expert in fertility, nutrition, and the founder and CEO of FullWell, a science-backed reproductive health supplement brand. With over 20 years of experience at the intersection of nutritional science, functional medicine, and evidence-based holistic care, Ayla has helped thousands of individuals optimize their fertility and overall health. She owns and operates Boston Functional Nutrition, an integrative practice specializing in women's health and infertility, and co-founded the Women's Health Nutrition Academy to educate professionals in the field. Her passion for cutting through misinformation and providing truly effective solutions has made her a trusted voice in reproductive wellness. Ayla, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Amy. I'm excited to be here.
Aw, thank you. I'd love to start off by asking you, what led you to focus on fertility, nutrition, and supplements, and how has your approach also evolved over the years?
I've been a registered dietitian for almost 2 decades and have a MS in health communications from Boston University. Also a trained herbalist. I have devoted years to continuing education. And I've worked with many different populations in different settings over my career. Much of my time has been spent in private practice, though. And that really was my career goal, was to build this multi-clinician, robust private practice that served people both in the local Boston area, but also globally, virtually, in reproductive health and infertility. And I started to specialize in this area 15 or so years ago. And when I did, there was no formal training whatsoever for dietitians, nor was fertility a big part of the dietetics curriculum. I still don't think it really is, surprisingly, given how many connections there are between fertility and nutrition and lifestyle. At the time, I saw clear connections between nutrition, lifestyle, and reproductive health in the research. And it really started there, seeing people in practice who needed my help and researching how to help them. And I was really hooked once I started to make the connections in my research and private practice work and seeing results, seeing things that really worked and really helped people. And I now profoundly appreciate how interconnected reproductive health is to overall health. I've spent time, really educating and mentoring other health practitioners who want to specialize in reproductive health. That has been really rewarding and something I enjoy because it's still so needed and there's still that gap that exists. But ultimately, FullWell was founded for really the same reason that I found myself specializing in reproductive health, due to the needs of people I was helping in practice. And again, I didn't actually expect to land here as running a dietary supplement company. If you had asked me, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that to be the case. But the problem I saw was the lack of truly evidence-based prenatal multivitamin formulas. And prenatals were by far and large the number one dietary supplement that I was really evaluating, recommending as part of protocols with my fertility work. And all the formulas in the market really lack this consideration for the entirety of the body of evidence, along with what we know about changing eating patterns, digestion, absorption, stressors on the body. And I really wanted a formula that had the right forms and doses of nutrients needed to support healthy pregnancy and generational health. And I have a lot to say about that. There was a trust issue for me as a health practitioner around the lack of transparency among brands and how they ensured safety and efficacy of their products. How does a brand really make sure that what's on the label is what's in every single serving? And so, again, as a practitioner, I couldn't get reliable information from brands on how they ensured that each serving met their label claims, that harmful contaminants weren't present. So I founded FullWell to provide the most evidence-based, thoroughly tested, and radically transparent prenatal multivitamin for my practice clients, and launched it on summer solstice, June 2019. I was 38 weeks pregnant and at the time, which is not when you launch something. I don't recommend that, but it wasn't something that I thought necessarily I would use beyond my private practice clients. That was really the goal. But I had colleagues and a network of colleagues at the time that were like, Ayla, we want this formula too. That's really how it all started and really evolved from there.
FullWell is known for its science-backed approach to supplements. And how do you ensure the highest quality and efficacy of your products, especially in an industry that isn't always well regulated?
Yeah. So what's interesting about this industry, and what I wanted was really to get behind the curtain. I've said that a lot over the years, and I am there now, and I have been for a while now. And so I really have seen all of the nuance, all the ways in which things can be done really right and well and cutting edge and really help people and make safe quality products. And I've also seen how people absolutely take shortcuts, and I've got some horror stories. It's always been about the quality, safety, and efficacy first. It's been largely a self-funded, fully operated and owned by me company. So I am not driven by outside investor marketing goals. I am not driven by a board that's trying to tell me to cut corners. Having that control has been really important to me. And what it means is in an industry, as you mentioned, that is actually well regulated, it's not well policed. There's not enough resources to actually police the regulations that do exist. And arguably, there's probably a lack of regulation overall, too. So it requires brands to have this level of ethics and integrity and commitment to quality control that I think is just it's a brand decision, right? And so for me, it means on the one hand, following every single step of the process and with quality control. And I think testing is something that I think is really an important way to measure the quality and the safety of products. Third-party testing, you want to make sure everything's done independently through an outside lab. A lot of brands have caught on. I think marketing professionals have kind of caught on, and you see a lot of brands say that they're third-party tested now. But for me, the proof, they need to show the receipts, so to speak, right? So I think it's only third-party testing is only as good as what's being tested, the methods that are being used, and are the specifications set appropriately and conservatively enough. And so I think it's really important for consumers, for health practitioners to work with brands who are sharing the results. So they're willing to actually be that level of transparent and transparent about the right things. So just a quick note is things like where you're tracing where ingredients come from and you're showing the end US distributor, like some popular brands are doing. That's not helpful for anyone. It's not really telling you anything about the quality. Things like testing for contaminants like heavy metals, for me, and I'm sure for you, some other contaminants that concern me are BPA and glyphosate and phthalates and some of these no endocrine disruptors, making sure that we're testing too for the potency and doing that the right way. It's actually very difficult to do in a multivitamin. Because, for example, if you test vitamin D in just a vitamin D supplement, that's fairly easy. When you put it in the context of a multi, it can be challenging. So I guess my point there is making sure that the brand is proving, especially with a prenatal multivitamin, that there are consistent doses in each serving, because we want to make sure you're getting that critical folate and choline and B12 and vitamin D and all those nutrients consistently, as you take it in a product like that.
Yeah. And you mentioned horror stories. You can't keep me dangling on that. Can you share, what's an example of a horror story in your industry?
There's so many examples of where, I've interacted with brands, but, as a practitioner trying to get information about the quality and third-party testing not being done, but saying it was being done. I think having things test grossly inaccurately. There was a brand, and I won't name names, but it was a fiber product, and you might be familiar with this. This was a few years ago, or a little bit more than that now, that really it was linked to a lot of reproductive health challenges and potentially even lawsuits around pregnancy loss due to the really harmful levels of lead and other heavy metals that were found in it and just weren't disclosed. It can get really extreme where we're really concerned about safety. And then it can be just smaller but cumulative egregiouses, kind of things that happen, I think, over time that just make you question, is somebody really looking at what's going into it, or are we putting all of our focus in marketing?
Yeah. So for our listeners, I tell my patients also, you are what you eat, and you're not just what you eat, you are what your mom ate, you are what your grandmother ate. And you touched on generational health and how you have so much to say about it. Can you speak about how important it is to pay attention to your nutrition and the vitamins you're taking and how it impacts generational health? Because that might not be something that people know about.
Yes. Oh, I get so excited about this. And I'm sure you do too, because with the name of this show and what you do, we know a baby girl is born with all the eggs that she'll have. I remember seeing this compelling image of a pregnant woman, right? Pregnant with a baby girl. And then she's got her eggs during that pregnancy. I remember talking to my mom about that. And I was like, my daughter was, in you, in a sense, when you were pregnant with me, and just how wild it is to think about that. And I think it's profoundly empowering when we really consider there's so much that's out of our control, but there is so much that is in our control when it comes to generational health. And what I'm most passionate about is trying to educate people on what that means and why that's important. And the connections that I've made over the years and where I've landed is that to some degree, preconception health for both women and men is arguably more important than maybe even pregnancy nutrition postpartum, because that window of time you have to influence epigenetics and early pregnancy and pregnancy risk and long-term health of baby is really important. And men play just as important a role, right? I actually often say that like men's preconception health is almost a women's health issue because of how much it does impact the health of a pregnancy, complications, health of baby. It's really, you see things like tracing cognitive health and in baby to choline intake, preconception and throughout pregnancy, and long-term metabolic health traced back to what dad and mom did in that preconception window. If we're really thinking preventative health and wellness, that's the ultimate preventative health. That's where we focus, is preconception.
So what I want to talk about is something that's really wildly popular right now. And it's in my space, in your space, and it's peptides. And they're gaining a lot of attention in the wellness space. And can you share what role they might play in fertility and reproductive health? And if there are any specific peptides that show promise for egg quality or hormone balance? I just started prescribing them in my practice. So I'd love for you as an expert to talk to us about that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. This has been such an interesting space to watch, and also really fascinating to see how the whole medical and wellness community is responding to them being in the market. Like so much with fertility, there's some good research, while there's also a little bit more of connecting the dots between the effects of the drugs and fertility. Peptides are not new, so to speak, really at all, but they are getting more attention now. Some in particular, like semaglutide, the brand name that goes under is Ozempic or Wegovy typically. There's tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro, your Zepbounds, and then liraglutide, like Victoza. And these are all GLP-1 agonists, which means they work by mimicking the effects of the natural hormone in your body, in all of our bodies, right? That's already produced to varying degrees, depending. Glucagon-like peptide 1, that's what GLP-1 stands for. So that's, again, a hormone that our body produces, and people have varying abilities to produce that. Some different things can affect our ability to produce it effectively. And that GLP-1 is involved in regulating blood sugar levels and appetite. And this is a hormone that is naturally released in the intestines in response to food intake. So when we eat, we naturally produce this in our guts, and it plays a really critical role in regulating blood sugar, blood glucose levels. And so what's the fertility connection? For me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too, but on the positive side, we know that improving insulin sensitivity can have a really positive effect on the functioning of the ovaries. Ovaries have insulin receptors. There's a lot of things where that blood sugar regulation can affect ovarian health and ovulation and all of that. And they also have a really profound, what I'm excited about too, is they have this really profound anti-inflammatory effect beyond their role in blood sugar regulation and weight loss. They reduce pro-inflammatory cytokines, which can lead to overall metabolic function improvement. And that's important because the reproductive system and the metabolic system are reciprocally regulated. In other words, what happens to one happens to the other. And that actually is one of the first like big aha moments I had in my career when it came to nutrition and my work and studies being related to fertility, was that metabolic reproductive health interconnectedness. And GLP-1 agonists can help maintain mitochondrial health too, which is also very exciting when it comes to egg quality, sperm quality, and fertility. And they do this by reducing reactive oxygen species, ROS, and enhancing our antioxidants defense system. So in other words, reducing oxidative stress, really supporting that, which is a huge area of focus when it comes to female and male fertility. I do know there was at least one good RCT controlled trial with women with PCOS, where they actually found there was, in addition to the metabolic benefits, they found that there was an impact on lowering androgen levels. So that was a positive study outcome as well.
Yeah, thank you for that incredible summary. I couldn't agree more. It's kind of like connecting the dots. So if it's doing this, then it should also help improve fertility. And then anecdotally, I've had patients where they've gone through several IVF cycles and they aren't successful until I put them on a GLP-1 and then they have their first euploid blast. So it's pretty
Yep.
incredible to see. It really is. So I want to transition to gut health. We hear a lot about gut health and its overall impact on wellness. How does the microbiome specifically influence fertility? And are there particular probiotic strains that are more beneficial for
Mhm.
those who are trying to conceive?
Yeah, gosh, probiotics, I mean, they've been around forever, both in supplement form and then obviously in the food system, right? I mean, probiotics, sure, many listeners know, but just to kind of level set, they're live microorganisms. They're often called the good bacteria that help keep our microbiome in balance. The amount of probiotics that we have within our body, on our skin, throughout the body actually weigh more than us, or could weigh quite a bit. It's a kind of a funny thing to think about, just how much probiotics really make up our entire body. And there's a balance at play, right? We need a balance of the good to help keep the bad, or what we might call opportunistic bacteria, in check. And during times of certain medication use, definitely with antibiotics, any of those kind of scenarios, right, you can see probiotics take a hit, and then some of these more opportunistics or even just outright bad bacteria take over a bit. It's important that we maintain a balance. And that's not quite as simple as just taking a probiotic, right? It's a matter of feeding the good bacteria that's already there and that we take in through our diet, whether it be in a supplement form, it be from a fermented food. And that's fiber. Fiber is something that nobody is getting enough of. Well, just about nobody. The majority of women are not meeting the minimum intake for fiber per day, neither are men. And that is food for our good bacteria. So I think if there's one thing you're going to do before, and this is as someone who makes a probiotic and sells a probiotic, but I would say before you even invest in one or think about anything more complicated, focusing on fiber intake just from your diet is a really good start, because you want the soil right there to help the good bacteria flourish. And that's essentially what fiber is. It's the food for it. But, I'm really interested in some of the specific probiotic strains that also support, that we have clinical research to show do certain things in the body and are otherwise hard to get unless you specifically seek them out. So for me, there are certain lactobacillus strains that are really important for vaginal health. I think the Lactobacillus acidophilus, the HN001 specifically, is really important for vaginal health and overall gut health. That's L. raminosus, actually. Bifidobacteria lactis is also a nice combination with that HN001. What I'm referring to with some of those numbers and that letters there is the specific strain of bacteria. And that's important because there's a lot of Lactobacillus acidophilus strains. There's a lot of L. raminosus strains. But when you get into the research, you want to look for those very specific species there of bacteria. And that's important because there's a lot of Lactobacillus acidophilus strains. There's a lot of L. raminosus strains. But when you get into the research, you want to look for those very specific species there. And L. raminosus is that HN001 is really interesting. During pregnancy, it can help support healthy blood sugar regulation, especially in older women, actually, with a history of gestational diabetes. So that can ultimately help improve outcomes for both mom and baby. And I also really like some of the newer research around specific strains like L. paracasi, which is LPC37, in helping to promote a healthy stress response. The stress response, stress in general, can have a detrimental effect, right, on reproductive health, definitely on pregnancy outcomes, postpartum, really any time of our life, right? I love that L. paracasi, LPC37 for that.
I make a lot of jokes and I think I'm funny, but my sister always reminds me to keep my day job. And I just came up with this. It's not really a joke, but I say that I got a divorce. It's very personal that I'm sharing it with you. I got a divorce from tequila. in April of 2024. And instead, I enjoy mocktails that have adaptogens in them. And we see this
Mhm.
growing trend of alcohol free cocktails or mocktails that claim to offer functional benefits. And I think I'm taking something or drinking something that's actually good for me and helpful. I'm not trying to get pregnant. And I just want to hear, what's your opinion on adaptogens and whether
Mhm.
they're safe for fertility and pregnancy?
I am an herbalist as well, and I absolutely love incorporating plants in a variety of ways into client protocols and recommending them. Adaptogens are among the safest class of herbs. You really cannot be called an adaptogen unless you are ultra, ultra safe. And that's been proven through science, but also historical use, which is important when it comes to herbalism and herbs too. I think a lot of times in the mocktails, the dose tends to be quite low as well. In any herb that's added, whether it's an adaptogen or anything else, you're also going to see antioxidants and like phytonutrients and all the good stuff that you see, in plants in general. And so some of the trend for these like new mocktail fun functional beverages, because while they might not have like fully therapeutic levels, right, of some of these herbs and different ingredients to have the effect that we might see like in a study, they do have a gentle positive effect. They're an overall nice alternative to something that we know causes oxidative stress, alcohol. And alcohol, of course, also competes with hormones like estrogen for detoxification. There's a lot of reasons why someone might switch. And I think there's just some really fun and good options out there now too to enjoy.
I love Recess. Do you have any brands that you like?
That's a good one. So I love, it's not a ready-made like mocktail brand, but one of my favorite brands and what I really like to enjoy at night is Rasa. Either their instant or like their loose leaf coffees. They've just got such nice, such nice formulas. But there's also Euphorics. There's DeSoy. That's delicious. They have one called Champagne Dreams, I think, that's a really fun one.
So, most people know that they need a prenatal vitamin. That word is out. But what are some of the most overlooked ingredients or nutritional needs for fertility and pregnancy that aren't covered in a standard prenatal that people need to know about?
Yeah, I love this question because there are some really big considerations that I just want all women to have this information to make the decision that's right for them. And so, a couple that I'll really point out, the big differentiators you'll see between prenatal multivitamins are some of the really large nutrients. So, things like choline, magnesium, and calcium. So, those are bulky nutrients and they take up a lot of room in the capsule and they'll drive up the number of capsules that you have to take per serving. So a lot of times, of course, I absolutely totally get it. We're looking for like the one a day, a two a day, a gummy, something really easy to take. But the reality is, if you do that, there's no possibility of getting in enough of those really critical nutrients. You can fit in arguably enough B vitamins and some of those really small nutrients, but you won't get those. And if we just talk about choline for a minute, 95% of women are not even meeting the adequate intake level for choline. This is really concerning to me because, first of all, the adequate intake level is not set at where it should be. It should actually probably be double based on better research that we have now. And not meeting that adequate intake level can have consequences for neural tube development. We talk a lot about folate when it comes to neural tube development, but actually folate works together with choline and vitamin B12 to help that neural tube really form and close really early in pregnancy by week 5, a week after a missed period. So choline's really, really critical. We put 300 milligrams in FullWell. That was about the amount that I saw as compared to what people are getting in typically through their diet, which is around 200 to 300 milligrams. I think another 300 milligrams gets you to a pretty good place because the minimum you need during pregnancy is about 450 milligrams, with newer research saying maybe 900 is best. And this all affects actually even babies' long-term cognitive health. So we're not even just talking neural tube. I mean, this is really brain health. But some other things too, magnesium, you'll see that often skipped on as well because it does take up a lot of space. Vitamin D is actually the most well-studied nutrient that we have. And there's a randomized clinical control trial that shows that 4,000 IUs is the minimum that mom and baby really need throughout pregnancy to keep just levels adequate, not even like robust, just adequate by the time of delivery. So 4,000 IUs of vitamin D is really important. Iodine, I see that skimped on a lot. Really, we want at least 250 micrograms there. I think the American Thyroid Association says 150, but if you really look at the data, 250 is a little more appropriate based on how little people are getting in. And then some other things that I would just point out is that I often see iron mixed into a prenatal. I don't think that's a great idea because iron interferes with the absorption of other minerals, zinc, calcium. You're going to see absorption of all of those nutrients. Iron is really should be dosed based on need. So I love seeing people get a ferritin added on to an iron panel to really see where they're at, and then just taking it separately, separate from the prenatal, and adjusting that dose. Similarly, I'd say omega-3 fatty acids, taking those separately. Because when I was really in the R&D period of making this product, I realized that there's real stability concerns with mixing omega-3 fatty acids into a multivitamin. So taking that separately is really important.
So I don't want you to necessarily call out any brands, but there's one brand that's really popular as a one-a-day prenatal. So would you say that it's true that maybe consumers are really not getting what they think they're getting by taking that?
Yeah, I think there's this sort of false assurance, right? That there's been some checks put in place and the right people formulating and making these products, right, to ensure that it's giving you what you need. And there's just no possibility of truly getting there with a one a day. And I think at the end of the day, it's like we're going based on what average dietary intake looks like. In my practice, even those clients who worked really hard at having a very nutrient dense diet had some really significant gaps, because reality is we just live in this modern environment where unfortunately the foods that we're getting are not as nutrient dense as they once were. We want apples 365 days of the year, so that means that sometimes they're coming from New Zealand, and that transit time, they lose nutrients. And food processing also leads to nutrient loss. You've got soil depletion due to the way that we farm. You've got stress and even digestion and absorption issues, medication use. All these things really contribute to why we need more nutrients today than we maybe did, even though as a dietitian, I want to say you can get everything you need from food. I really do. I want that to be the case. But the only way that I can really see it done, and trust me, I've sat and calculated this all out, is you've got to be like consistently eating organ meats and lots of different kinds of cuts of different parts of animals, along with very strategically chosen, like varied food that I think is just really, really hard to do.
Well, thank you for that. So you've been at the forefront, clearly, of fertility nutrition for years. What are some of the most exciting or cutting edge developments you're seeing in the field right now?
What I'm most excited about now is the way that accessing information about your reproductive health and overall fertility care is becoming more accessible. I think that we all can agree that the current medical model has got some problems and it's challenging. Fertility care could be financially, emotionally, physically expensive, and also just tricky to get there and to understand, do I need it? Do I not? What do I need? Who do I go to? So I really like some of the what I would call like first step type of care. There's of course the specialists like you that are fantastic, right? And that is so needed. And ultimately someone may get there, right? But then there's screening tools like at home lab tests that can give you insight into just a bit about what's going on so that you have an idea of, do I need to take some next steps now or can I wait? We actually just launched an at-home fertility test similar to that to measure, just not to give you a comprehensive fertility assessment, that you would get working one-on-one with a practitioner like yourself or, me in practice, but enough to tell you, okay, should I book an appointment to dig deeper? Do I need to consider egg freezing maybe, a little bit sooner rather than later? Or where does my fertility look, my reproductive health look pretty good right now? So things like that, as well as some of the clinics that I see too that are offering just more comfortable experiences and care in a virtual / in-person like hybrid model. All of that is exciting to me. We're going to continue to see that because there's a demand from consumers, rightfully so, who just want a better experience for something that's, you imagine being different, right? You imagine it being really personal and beautiful, your journey to start and grow a family. And if you can maintain that element of it with some of this kind of care, that's a great thing.
Yeah. Ayla, it's just been so lovely talking to you today. So, where can people find out how to work with you and more about FullWell?
These days, I'm really spending most of my time really at FullWell, and FullWellFertility.com is where we've got our products, of course, but we've also got this really robust knowledge well where I've worked really hard with my team on some comprehensive deep dives into some of these topics that we talked about today, and just a way for you to get some education and take a look at what we've got. That's also where all of our test results and quality overview of how we handle quality at FullWell really lives. And we've got a practitioner directory too. So if you're looking for a fertility acupuncturist or you need a dietitian to help you dig into some of the things like we talked about today, right? That's a great place to go to find someone who's local to you, or you can use that directory to check off any number of filters that you want to find something that really, really works well.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add today?
I think that just the last thing I wanted to point out when we were talking about peptides and the GLP-1s is that there's all these great benefits, but the thing that I'm concerned about is going into a pregnancy depleted. So I just wanted to mention that I think that's if you are considering taking the GLP-1 agonist, any of those medications, that would be a time to put an extra focus on a multivitamin, a fish oil at the bare minimum, I'd say, to help support making sure that you're not headed into pregnancy at all depleted and you're really still nourishing your reproductive health. And that's the way that I think we get the benefits from these drugs, is making sure that we protect our lean body mass, we eat enough, and we make sure that we're protecting our micronutrient status.
Yeah, I don't think that is reinforced enough for patients who are taking those medications. That's definitely something that I share with patients, but I see patients getting these prescriptions elsewhere, and that's not reinforced. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Well, thank you again, Ayla. It was such a pleasure meeting you. Thank you for this wonderful discussion today. And I know that this is going to help so many people improve their generational health.
Thank you so much for having me.